Hello students, welcome to Byju's IAS. Welcome to a session on economy this week, wherein we'll be taking some of the very important articles that have appeared in various business related newspapers and we'll be analyzing these particular articles. For this particular video, I've chosen the time period from 10th to 16th August 2020 and the articles that I've chosen are from Business Line, Hindu, Business Standard, Indian Express and LiveMint. Let's begin the discussion. The first article is related to Agriculture Infrastructure Fund. Government of India very recently has announced one of the very important initiatives in the agriculture sector in the form of Agriculture Infrastructure Fund or AIF. Under this particular AIF, Government of India has focused on developing infrastructure especially under post-harvest segment. Now under this particular AIF, Government of India has proposed to invest 1 lakh crore rupees to develop post-harvest infrastructure. Now under this, in this particular fiscal, 10,000 crore rupees will be spent and remaining 90,000 crore rupees will be spent in the slots of 30,000 crore rupees each in the next 3 fiscals. This is the proposal of the government. Now in this particular scheme, they will be providing one, credit guarantees, and the second is interest subvention. Now what is the meaning of both of these particular terms? As per the proposal, credit guarantees for loans up to 2 crore rupees will be provided. And second, interest subvention of 3% on loans up to 2 crore rupees will be provided. Be it either credit guarantee or interest subvention, both of them will be provided either to farmers, farmer producer organizations, primary agriculture cooperative societies for developing the post-harvest infrastructure. Now what do you mean by post-harvest infrastructure? Please understand, in the agriculture sector, basically the whole activities will be divided into pre-production and post-production. Under post-production, you will basically come across activities such as transportation, warehousing, sorting, grading, cold storage, ripening chambers, etc. So the objective of Government of India is to promote development of infrastructure in the latter part of the whole agriculture supply chain system. Now why this is important? Various experts as well as committees have pointed out that the agriculture sector in India suffers from certain infrastructure bottlenecks. Now what do you mean by this? It basically means the infrastructure that is required, especially under the post-harvest management, is very less in India, or in simple terms is not sufficient in case of India. As per the committee which was set up by Government of India to look into, give recommendations to double the income of the farmers, I am referring to Ashok Dalwai committee. This committee stated that because of the infrastructure bottlenecks in India, India suffers from loss of more than 92,000 crore worth of the food grains annually. And especially in case of a post-harvest management, infrastructure presence in India is very low. For example, we do not have sufficient ripening chambers, reefer vehicles are not sufficient, cold warehousing is not sufficient, etc. In order to address this particular issue, which will basically provide the farmers the freedom to store and sell these particular products in a staggered manner in the market and earn higher revenues over a period of time, Government of India has proposed this particular agriculture infrastructure scheme. Under this particular agriculture infrastructure fund, as already mentioned, Government of India proposes to invest 1 lakh crore rupees in this particular post-harvest infrastructure management. Now, with this particular announcement, it is expected that the farmers will store, sell and make higher revenues first, and second, with the development of this particular infrastructure, the price volatilities of these particular commodities in the market will also come down. For example, at various points of time, the prices of vegetables will spike, prices of the same vegetables will fall to a very great extent. Best example for this is onion, tomato. Now with development of this particular post-harvest management infrastructure, we expect the volatilities to come down. Third, with this particular development of infrastructure, certain linkages will be provided, employment will be generated. These are some of the advantages that we can expect from announcement of such a fund. Having said so, there are various experts who have raised certain concerns or issues related to this particular announcement. First, National Horticulture Board (NHB) already has a credit-linked subsidy scheme to provide subsidies for development of post-harvest infrastructure such as reefer vehicles, cold warehousing, ripening chambers, etc. So that rather than announcing one more scheme, Government of India should have taken the earlier schemes which provide the same concept of incentives and should have merged all these particular schemes. Second is the issue related to interest subvention. As already mentioned, the interest subvention that will be provided under this particular scheme will be 3%. Various experts as well as the startups which are part of this particular scheme and FPOs again part of this particular scheme have raised their concern saying that in case of a farmer taking a loan from, let's say, a bank, the rate of interest will be 4%. Whereas these particular startups, FPOs, when they take loan for infrastructure development related to agriculture sector, the loans are usually rated at around 14%. That is, the rate of interest will be around 14%. So even with the Government of India announcing an interest subvention of 3%, it will not be sufficient in terms of cutting down the cost of the capital or cost of the money that these particular institutions will be borrowing for developing this kind of an infrastructure. That is the second one. Third one, various experts have stated that rather than investing or spending so much of money under one particular scheme, Government of India should have taken this particular money and should have used it to provide better information to the farmers. That is, the focus must be on a concept of a crop planning and a dissemination of the information to the farmers, which will help them in making certain cropping decisions. So these are some of the points related to this particular agriculture infrastructure fund which has been announced by the government. Now, based on this, I have given a question here. Which of the following committee has given recommendations to double the income of the farmers? And the right answer will be option D, Ashok Dalwai committee. What about the other committees? PGNI committee is with respect to the operation of public sector banks. Bibek Debra committee is with respect to railways. Vijay Kelkar committee recently has given recommendation with respect to public-private partnership. Ashok Dalwai committee is associated with the doubling of farmers' income. DFI. Right option is option D. And I have given a descriptive question. Discuss the recommendations of Ashok Dalwai committee on doubling of the farmers' income. Next article is related to PMFBY. Very recently, Gujarat government has announced its own scheme to provide agriculture insurance to the farmers and has decided to skip the implementation or has decided to exit the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana. Now, before looking at the points given in the article, what is a Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana? The central government announced this particular scheme to provide agriculture insurance, or to be more precise, crop insurance. Now, please understand, this is one of the scheme which is being implemented which will provide crop insurance. For example, there is also weather-based crop insurance scheme which is being implemented along with Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana in the agriculture sector. Now, what was the speciality of this particular Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana? Government of India announced this particular scheme with a very huge fanfare. Under this particular scheme, Government of India stated that the premium paid by the farmer will be the lowest. As per this particular scheme, the premium that was to be paid by the farmer was 1.5%, 2%, 5% of the sum insured. That is, in simple terms, imagine I am a farmer, I have opted for insurance for a particular crop, and if the coverage is 100 rupees and the premium payment was 10%, it means I'll have to pay a premium of 10 rupee. But Government of India under this particular scheme basically stated that for some of the crops it will be 1.5%, for some it will be 2%, for some will be 5%. Let's take the example of 2% premium payment. So initially I was supposed to make a payment of 10%, that will be 10 rupees. But Government of India stated, not required, you need to pay only 2% of the sum insured, that will be 2 rupees. But an insurance company requires full 10 rupee payment in the form of a premium. Now government said, whatever is the difference between the actuarial premium and the premium paid by the farmer will be equally paid by the center and state. Again, I'll repeat it. Very important current affairs point here. Earlier, Government of India said the difference between the premium that is being demanded or charged by the insurance company and the insurance premium paid by the farmer, the difference of that will be equally shared between center and the state. This has been very recently changed. The share of the center has been reduced from 50% earlier to 25% for irrigated areas and 30% to non-irrigated areas. Have you understand this? Very, very important. Please make a note of this. Earlier, Government of India as well as the states would equally contribute to the difference between these particular two premiums. But very recently in 2020 itself, the Government of India has stated that its contribution to the premium will be reduced from 50% to 25% in case of irrigated areas and 30% in case of non-irrigated areas, which also means that remaining premium or a higher premium will have to be paid out by the states, which indicates that the expenditure incurred by the states in order to implement this particular scheme will increase. So this is one of the very important changes which has been introduced by the government very recently. Now in addition to this, second very important change that was introduced by the government was with respect to who shall be enrolling into this particular scheme. Earlier, understand this, earlier the farmers were divided into two parts. Those particular farmers who had cropping loans and those particular farmers which did not take a crop loan from a bank. Earlier when this particular scheme was implemented, all those particular farmers who had taken a crop loan from a bank were mandatorily covered under this particular scheme. I repeat, as per the earlier provisions, all those particular farmers who had taken a cropping loan from a bank were mandatorily covered, compulsorily were supposed to take insurance under this particular Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana. What about those particular farmers who have not taken a cropping loan? It was optional for these particular farmers. And very recently, Government of India has made it optional even for the farmers who have taken a cropping loan. So now, as per the latest changes which have been done with respect to this particular scheme, the farmers have an option to opt for this particular Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana. That is the second very important change which has been done very recently by the government. First change, reduce the contribution to this particular scheme. Second, make it optional for all the farmers now. These are the two very important changes. Now coming back to the discussion given in the article, very recently the state government of Gujarat has announced its own scheme to provide crop insurance to the farmers. The name of the scheme is Mukhyamantri Kisan Sahay Yojana. Various features of this particular scheme are: 1. There is no need for the farmers to be registered under this particular scheme. All the farmers in the state will be covered under this particular scheme. Earlier, under the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, 15 to 17 lakh farmers were covered under the scheme. Now all the farmers, that will be more than 56 lakh farmers who are from Gujarat, will be covered under this particular scheme. In addition to this, third very important feature of this particular scheme is no requirement of a payment of a premium by the farmers. All the premium that is required to be paid for coverage will be done by the state government itself. These are the three very important features of this particular scheme. Now, why did this particular government decide to skip the implementation of Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana? As per the statement given in this particular article, the expenditure which would be incurred by the government for implementation of Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana has been very, very high. Rather than providing a coverage to part of the farmer population, the state government has decided to implement another scheme where the coverage will be provided and expenditure will be much lesser compared to Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana. Apart from this, earlier the state government of Bihar also skipped the implementation or said that it will not be implementing the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana. In addition to this, two more states which have not implemented or have discontinued the implementation of this particular scheme are Punjab and West Bengal. So these are some of the very important points which have been given in this particular article. Now based on this, let me take up a question here. Consider the following statements regarding Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana. It is mandatory for all the farmers to opt for this particular scheme. Wrong. For a simple reason, earlier I mentioned this. Earlier also, it was optional for the farmers who had not taken any kind of a crop loan. So this particular statement is wrong, and very recently it has been made optional for all these particular farmers. Second, the expenditure will be shared equally between center and states. Earlier it was true, but now this is wrong. Earlier it was 50% paid out by the center, 50% by states. Now this has come down to 25% in irrigated, 30% in non-irrigated, and rest of the premium payment burden has to be taken by the state government itself. The premium paid will be the same for all the types of lands. This is also wrong. I've already mentioned this. For irrigated it will be 25%, for non-irrigated it will be 30%. All the statements are wrong, and you will have to find out which of the above statements are wrong. Since all the statements are wrong, option D will be the right option. Next question. Consider the following statements regarding Mukhyamantri Kisan Sahay Yojana launched by the Gujarat state government. It is mandatory for all the farmers to get registered under this particular scheme. It is not mandatory, right? First statement is wrong. Second, all the farmers in the state would be covered under this particular scheme. It is correct. Right option will be second, that is option B. Only second statement is correct. The next article is related to monetary policy framework. Now understand this. Government of India and RBI entered into an agreement. This particular agreement is basically referred as Monetary Policy Framework Agreement. The agreement was entered into in 2015 and came into force from 2016. Under this particular agreement, RBI was supposed to maintain the inflation rate at 4%. And certain variance level was provided, that is plus or minus 200 basis points. In simple terms, RBI is supposed to maintain the inflation rate at 4% plus or minus 200 basis points means it can allow the inflation rate to go up to 6% or fall up to 2%. Anytime it breaches these particular inflation rate levels, then RBI has to take certain measures or has to take certain steps in order to bring the inflation under control. In addition to this, once every 6 months, RBI was supposed to take the inflation rates in the past as well as the future and publish a report. In simple terms, RBI has to publish a report which basically gives the information related to the causes of inflation rate for the last 6 months and what could be the reasons for inflation rate in the next 6 months and what would be the estimated inflation rate. Now what if inflation rate crosses 6% or falls below 2%? As per the Monetary Policy Framework Agreement, if inflation rate crosses 6% for 3 consecutive quarters or falls below 2% for 3 consecutive quarters, then RBI has to give a written explanation to Government of India, in which RBI has to lay out 3 very important points. First, what are the reasons or causes of this particular inflation rate? Second, what measures will be taken by RBI to bring it under control? And third, within what time period RBI will be bringing the inflation under control? These are some of the very important points in the Monetary Policy Framework Agreement. Now initially, although I said it was signed between Government of India and RBI, please remember this. On behalf of Government of India, it was the President of India who signed the agreement between the government as well as RBI. So if UPSC says it is an agreement which was signed between President and RBI, please do not be confused, it is correct. And if you have seen the document published by RBI related to the MPFA, it clearly states that it is an agreement by President of India on behalf of a Finance Ministry Government of India with the Reserve Bank of India. Now, as a result of the signing of this agreement, we set up Monetary Policy Committee where the composition was 6 members, 3 of which will be from RBI and 3 will be the experts appointed by Government of India. And this particular Monetary Policy Committee was given the duty of maintaining the inflation rate and also promoting the growth for a period of 5 years. And here comes the current affairs part. Very recently, the tenure of this particular Monetary Policy Committee ended. And very recently, they also completed the last monetary policy review meeting. Now, the question is, what has been the effectiveness, what is the evaluation of the monetary policy, and what should be done in the coming days by the government? First and foremost, in terms of controlling inflation, understand this, though the inflation target that was given to this particular committee was a 4%, various experts said this is a very low target. Inflation rate target should have been much higher than this. Various experts agree that it should have been somewhere in the range of 6%. That is the first thing. So if Government of India wants to look into the inflation targeting, it better increase the inflation target to, let's say, 6%. Or else another very important recommendation is, before Government of India can decide what should be the inflation target, we must take what is the trend of inflation rate around the world, and the target that is set up in India should reflect or should have some resemblance to the inflation movement happening around the world. That's the first thing. Second thing, there has to be a synchronization between the monetary policy and fiscal policy. Because various points of time it has been found that it is a fiscal policy which influences the inflationary trend in the market. For example, in recent times, Government of India, through its fiscal policy measures, has infused a huge amount of money into the system. At one or the other point of time, this particular money which has been infused into the system will start contributing to inflation in the market. So there has to be a synchronization between the monetary policy as well as the fiscal policy for better monitoring of the inflation and implementation of the measures. Third, what should be the inflation rate which has to be taken? In simple terms, the nominal anchor of inflation. We take CPI, Consumer Price Index, as a nominal anchor, but here is a problem. When we take CPI, huge amount of a weightage has been given for food articles. And please understand this, since huge amount of weightage has been given for food articles, and there's a huge volatility in the prices of the food commodities in the market, inflationary rate will also be very, very volatile. And since inflation rate becomes volatile, RBI is forced to take measures. For example, if because of the food prices, the inflation rate, let's say, crosses more than 6%, then RBI has no option of reducing the interest rates. Because the concern is that if RBI reduces the interest rates, that is, let's say, repo rate, then the money supply in the market will increase, the consumption demand will increase, which will lead to inflationary trend again in the market. When inflation rate is already more than 6%, RBI would not want to contribute to inflation further. So RBI will not have any option but to either maintain the same repo rate or increase the repo rate. But don't you think food prices are out of the control of RBI? Whatever is the decision of RBI, it will not have huge amount of impact on the prices of food commodities in the market. There are so many factors which are out of the control of RBI which will have an impact on the prices of food commodities in the market. So the argument in simple terms here is, rather than focusing on headline CPI inflation, which is used as a nominal anchor here, recommendation is use core inflation. What is the basic difference? In case of a headline inflation, we consider all the commodities in the basket, whereas core inflation will exclude the prices of some of the commodities which are very volatile in terms of prices. For example, food prices are very much volatile, fuel prices are very much volatile in the market. So while calculating core inflation, we will exclude the prices of these, or we will not take these particular commodities in the basket itself. Whereas when I say headline inflation, we will consider all these particular commodities and their prices to calculate the change in the price level. So better rate to consider for deciding this particular monetary policy is the core inflation rather than the headline inflation. So these are some of the points which have been discussed in this particular article in relation to monetary policy framework. Now based on this, I have given a question here. Consider the following statements regarding monetary policy framework agreement. MPC has been given a statutory backing by amending the Banking Regulation Act of 1970. Partly wrong, but the whole statement will be wrong for a simple reason. Understand this. It is true that the Monetary Policy Committee has been given a statutory backing, but not by amending Banking Regulation Act, but rather amending RBI Act. Okay, so first statement is wrong. As per the Act, MPC is supposed to meet at least 6 times in a year. Again wrong. It is supposed to meet at least 4 times in a year. So the right option will be option D. Both the statements are false. Next question. Which of the following committees have recommended establishing monetary policy committee in one or the other way? YV Reddy committee, right? Yes. 2002 this committee recommended it. Tarapore committee 2006, yes, it recommended. Percy Mistry committee, yes. Raghuram Rajan committee, yes. These are the 4 committees which are listed and have recommended the monetary policy committee in one or the other form. So right option will be option D, 1, 2, 3 and 4. But in addition to this, also make a note of it. It was a Urjit Patel committee which recommended MPC. The FSLRC, Financial Sector Legislative Reforms Committee, also has recommended MPC. The FSLRC will also be referred to as a Sri Krishna committee. So these are the 6 committees which are very famous in terms of recommendation of monetary policy committee in one or the other way. So this is the discussion related to article. One descriptive question here. Critically evaluate the performance of the monetary policy committee set up under the monetary policy framework agreement in 250 words. The next article is related to taxpayer charter. First and foremost, what do you mean by a taxpayer charter? Then I'll discuss what has been provided in the charter. Please understand this. In case of a taxation system, there are 2 very important stakeholders, or there are 2 very important parties. One is the taxpayer and the other one is the tax department. So these are the 2 very important stakeholders or participants in the taxation system. What does a tax charter do? Tax charter in simple terms provides the duties and obligations of both of these particular parties. I repeat, tax charter basically provides the duties as well as the obligations of the taxpayer as well as the tax department. Now please understand this. As per government data itself, in the last couple of years, the number of people who are filing the taxes have increased. Or in simple terms, the people who are falling under the tax bracket have increased. But the effective taxpayers have remained at around 1.5 crore. Out of the total population of 130 crore in India, only 1.5 crore people are effectively paying taxes. Underline the term effectively paying taxes for a simple reason. Understand this? If you are a taxpayer, it doesn't mean that you are an effective taxpayer. On the other hand, if you are an effective taxpayer, it definitely means that you are a taxpayer. Confusing, I know, let me elaborate. Imagine you earn an income of 3 lakh rupees. Okay, you are earning an annual income of 3 lakh rupees. Now understand this. Since your annual income is more than 2.5 lakh rupees, 50,000 rupees above and over this is a taxable income. So based on the slab rate, you are supposed to pay certain taxes to the government. Now understand this. What if you have made this particular 50,000 rupees in the form of a contribution to PPF, Public Provident Fund, or you have paid this particular 50,000 rupees in the form of a housing loan, etc. So in such cases, the amount of a tax that you are paying to government will be given back to you. Is it okay? That is, you can claim deductions on the taxes that you are paying. So effectively you are not paying any taxes. This is one example. In addition to this, Government of India itself very recently has changed the guidelines in such a way that those people who are earning up to 5 lakh and paying taxes will get their taxes refunded. So in simple terms, you are a taxpayer, no doubt, but you are not an effective taxpayer. So on the other hand, let's take another example. A person who wants a 10 lakh rupees, let's say, will pay a tax of 2 lakh rupees to the government after claiming all the deductions, whatever concessions are there, etc. So he is a taxpayer, he is an effective taxpayer. So Government of India very recently has stated that in recent times more than 2.5 crore people have come under the taxation bracket, but effectively only 1.5 crore people are paying the income taxes to the government. There is a huge amount of a tax evasion that is actually happening in the taxation system in India. Though Government of India has taken various reforms in the last couple of years, for example demonetization, amnesty scheme, etc., the amount of a tax collection has not improved at a satisfactory level, which you can understand by looking at the ratio of a direct taxes to GDP, which has remained around 5.5% in the last couple of years. So understand this, the number of income earners are very high. The income tax collections have been not satisfactory or have not been proportional. In order to address this particular issue, very recently Government of India has announced a taxpayer charter. Under this particular taxpayer charter, it has laid out certain commitments from the tax department side as well as the obligations of the taxpayer. That is, in simple terms, the duties of the taxpayer as well as the commitments of the tax authorities. Now, some of these particular the commitments as well as the obligations have been listed out here. Please have a look at it. UPSC prelims can ask a question on this. The commitments include fair, courteous and reasonable treatment, treat taxpayer as an honest taxpayer, provide mechanism for appeal and review, provide complete and accurate information, provide timely decisions, respect the privacy of the taxpayer. On the other hand, the obligations of the taxpayer are be honest and compliant, disclose complete information, be informed about tax rules and compliance requirements, maintain accurate record and documentation. All these particular commitments as well as obligation have been introduced under a concept called as a transparent taxation, honoring the honest platform. Now understand this. In addition to this, what is very important to remember with respect to this article is this. Government of India has announced faceless assessment of the taxes and faceless appeal system. Now with respect to faceless assessment, it has already come into force. It has been implemented. Although the government said from September 25th itself it has come into force. Please make a note of this. From last year itself, the concept of a faceless assessment had been introduced in some of the cities such as Pune, Mumbai, Hyderabad, Bangalore, New Delhi, etc. So this has been expanded. Now what is the idea of a faceless assessment? It simply means the tax assessments will be done by unknown parties. In simple terms, now the concept of faceless assessment and faceless appeal basically means that in order to reduce the corruption practices, the assessment as well as appeals will be in a centralized system now. That is, who will be assessing these particular IT returns will be done randomly, and the assessment, once it is done and the tax demand is raised, there will be a methodology or a process which will be followed with respect to faceless appeals. This has been introduced under the concept of a taxpayer charter. With this, Government of India expects that the corruption in the system will come down, the income tax collections will increase over a period of time, and the third very important point is related to tax disputes. Understand this, the number of tax disputes are very high, as a result of which the amount which is disputed is stuck up for many years. So Government of India with implementation of the taxpayer charter also expects that the disputes will come down. Now these are the objectives which Government of India wants to achieve. Having said so, there are certain concerns which have been raised by various experts with respect to this particular charter. First and foremost, various experts have stated that the back-end system which will be used to handle these particular the appeals as well as the assessments may not be ready in time. As a result of which, the time taken for the appeals or the whole process to be over with respect to assessment will be very difficult to adhere to. For example, the tax officials will be allocated these particular IT returns within a stipulated period of time. They are supposed to read this particular assessment and find out if there are any issues with respect to this particular assessment and raise a certain demand. Now please understand this. Various experts say that the CAs, chartered accountants, take many months to prepare this particular IT returns in a very nice way or in a crafted way, and the income tax officials will have to read this and have to find out if there are any misuse of the provision within a very stipulated period of time. Very difficult to adhere to these particular time limits, and if they don't adhere to the time limits, the number of pending IT returns will keep on increasing, time consumption will also increase. Second, various experts have warned Government of India that if certain people know how this particular system works, that is how the infrastructure backbone works, then this particular system can be manipulated by these particular people. Third very important issue which has been raised is with respect to the dispute, that is income tax dispute. One of the objective, like I said, is to reduce the dispute, but various experts have warned Government of India that the tax officials, in order to meet the targets which are set up by Government of India, usually in the third and fourth quarter, might raise a higher level of a tax or demand higher level of tax. And since there is a concept of a faceless assessment as well as appeal, the taxpayer might challenge this particular concept of the tax demand raised by the tax official, which will again lead to higher tax disputes. So these are some of the issues which are being discussed with respect to this particular taxpayer charter. So these are some of the articles as well as the questions related to these particular articles for this particular time period. Thank you. Have a good day.